What day is it, Mark?
Oh, good question. I was going to go on the Google machine, but I think it's Friday.
It's Friday. You know what that means, Mark?
Rapid Fire Friday.
Boom, boom, boom. Rapid Fire Friday.
Rapid Fire Friday. Did you hear that?
Barely, because you pushed it and it didn't work well. Now I did.
Okay.
There we go.
The email
bell. Yep.
All right. Well, this email is from Heather, and she just sent it right before this episode started. But since we have her right here, I think we should just let her ask the question live.
Wow, really?
There you go.
Hey, so longtime listener.
Hey.
Yeah, so you want me to read this whole thing? Seriously?
Well, that's what we were thinking when you sent it.
I know,
I saw your email. I was like, that's a lot of words, Heather.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm known for having a lot of words.
Okay, great.
All right, so I had recently heard, like last month, it was Christmas. Anyway, I recently heard something about something that caused me to look into the part of the story about the wise men.
Yeah.
Okay? Mm-hmm. So it's only mentioned in Matthew.
Correct.
That's the only gospel that talks about it, so it was very confusing to me. Uh-huh. And I had heard this blip, and I'll just give you the summary of what I heard. The Magi were magicians, like what we would see in the Old Testament. Like pagan rulers would look to them for answers. These men looked to the stars for signs and did not know God, but the prophecies that they studied and that they knew about them. Not God, right? They go to Herod first because he is the ruler, and it would make sense that that's where the new king would be born. And then when they see Jesus at about age 2, they see God, and then they're turned away from their pagan beliefs. They gave gifts for telling of his kingship and death. Like that's
because frankincense is like for embalming bodies.
right. So then, and they also have names.
Well, we don't know that for
Okay,
sure.
but this is what I heard.
Well, that's
right?
a
so
Catholic
the whole
tradition. So,
okay, so it's the whole part.
Yeah.
Okay, so these, like I said, this is my paraphrase of what I had heard, and it just brought out all these questions.
Yeah.
So do you want me to just throw all these questions at you?
I
let's
think
just
I
go
could
one
take
at
them
a
through
time.
one
Okay,
by one.
perfect. I'll shut up now.
No, you did
No,
great.
go one
Thank
at
you.
a time. No,
Yeah.
do the questions one at a time.
Sure, yeah, you can do
Oh,
that.
all right. So who were the wise men?
We don't know.
All right, thanks.
So, let me just, they come out of nowhere because, like, all that stuff that you just said there's a Catholic tradition that jumped up about, they name them, which we do not know their name. They come from the East, we know that for sure, and so probably they come from Persia. And if you think about it, Daniel spent time in Babylon. And so the reason that they would get to know the prophecy of the Old Testament is because of the teaching that Daniel would have brought in Babylon. And so that is probably the best guess. And part of Daniel was written in Aramaic, which was the language of that nation. And so that's my guess, but no one knows for sure. They just show up, right? And so they clearly don't know much about Jesus. They don't know where he's born. They don't know that he was going to be born in Bethlehem. So they show up to Herod. And so they're not that aware, but they know something's going on. And in the ancient world, whenever there's astrological events, people tied them to significant, earthly events, right? And so probably what they were Persian priests of some kind, because that's the idea of what a magi was, and or as the New Testament translates them, wise men, and they brought gifts for a king, and so, but oddly, myrrh and frankincense, which is used for death and stuff, and so anyway, so like, there's everybody wants to like talk about the tradition, and like what their names were, but there was no. I think the traditional names were Melchior, Caspar, and Balthazar. But that's a Catholic tradition that did not. They're not.
Okay,
named.
so I tried finding them in the Bible, and that's what you're saying. It would be in the
Apocrypha.
Thank you.
Apocrypha.
No, I don't think they're in the Apocrypha.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a tradition that jumped
interesting.
later, and so like they're not. We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know.
All right. So
the idea in Matthew is we have Gentiles coming to worship the Jewish king, and it's a picture of one day this Jewish king being the king of all.
Which is why Matthew says it, because he's writing to the Jews and he
writing
wants
to a
them to
Jewish
understand
audience,
the
right, exactly.
legitimacy of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the second question. So how on earth then were they able to follow a star to where he was? Because I mean, I've followed the moon before, and that ain't how it happens.
Well, but you got a direction though, right? The moon moves across the sky.
Sure, but I'm just saying, like, you never get to the moon.
No,
Like,
you don't get to the
got
moon, but
star.
you can go to the star, right? Like for a certain amount of time, Mars shows up. Mars shows up every evening,
Sure.
right? So you can go the direction of Mars and keep following it.
Oh,
and
I
keep
see.
going that direction.
So I'm thinking like a cartoon version of the Nativity story where, now that star is directly above, and like I guess that's what I'm thinking as they
It's just
followed
in the
the
sky.
star.
You just
Yeah,
keep
okay.
going that direction until you hit him.
All right. So was he a baby or a little boy?
The Magi? When the Magi come, he wasn't a baby anymore. The shepherds saw him as a baby.
So he was 2 or ish?
We don't know that for sure,
okay.
but he was.
Because that was one of the things I heard in this.
We don't know how old he was
All right,
because we're not told.
Okay.
But it's after the shepherds, and so we know that he's not a little baby anymore.
Okay. So then the last, sort of question I have is that they gave pretty expensive gifts.
Yeah, well, they're given to a king. They think he's royalty, right?
Sure. So were
And they don't
Mary and
really-
Joseph like totally rich at this point then?
No.
Oh.
No, because they gave the interesting thing about Mary and Joseph is when they go to offer him, like, because he has to be circumcised, and they offer the sacrifice of a poor peasant. Now there was some gold, but who knows how much the gold was, right? So we don't know. Like Matthew says that they come. It says, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men came from the east, came to Jerusalem saying, where is the one who has been born king of the Jews? Right? And so it's just after. Mm-hmm. And so they weren't. So who knows what they did with those gifts? Who knows if they kept them for him or whatever? But, we do know that Joseph was a working man because he trained Jesus to be a carpenter, and so it wasn't like they were able to live a life of luxury or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I was mostly joking for some of those, but and I think you already answered this question. But what's the significance then of this wise men story?
The name of Jesus. People are going to come from all over to meet Jesus. I mean, it's a foreshadowing of that reality.
All right.
And his name and his fame is going to spread.
All right. Well, thanks for answering my question.
Sure, you bet,
Heather.
Heather Corbett.
If anybody has any questions, they could just email them
They could
to production.
at senatorgilbert.com.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, email Bill.
That's right. So this was an email question, and just going to exercise some judgment and keep them anonymous. It was very long. I'm just going to kind of summarize and ask you.
Yes.
This emailer appreciates Rich's sermons, but seeks clarification on a perceived inconsistency between his church messages and the messages on the podcast.
Yes.
While the pastor advises against being weird and sharing faith, the speaker argues that in evangelism, deep emotional openness and proclaiming belief in Christ's resurrection are inherently unusual compared to social norms.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
They feel Rich's message may favor those naturally gifted in communication while overlooking those who struggle with expression. They seek acknowledgement that Christianity itself is countercultural and weird by worldly standards.
Of course.
And want to clarify on whether believers should be bold or more low-key in their approach to sharing their faith.
Well, a couple things. When whoever occupies the pulpit on Sundays, we're having a conversation here. I'm not having a conversation on Sunday.
Yeah.
So the tone, the mode is completely different. And so it's going to feel different because it is different.
Yeah.
And so the mode of communication on Sunday is essentially a persuasive speech. This is a conversation.
Yeah.
And so that's going to feel different. And so it's going to feel more formal on Sundays and more informal here. Now, when I talk about as Christians, go forth and don't be weird, what I'm not saying is that our message is normal. It's not. But there's a way in which Christians can be awkward and strange and that in itself puts up a barrier in front of the gospel. Right?
So not in terms of sharing the gospel, but in their actions outside of sharing.
Yeah, right. Like, like there's all kinds of ways. Like, we can be like, what we want to do is share the gospel in such a way that that fits our personality. If we're bold, be bold. If we're low key, be low key. If we whatever we are, let's be that as we share the gospel, right?
Yeah.
The gospel's strange and it's going to be a stumbling block, but it's very easy to be like to take a whole bunch of things that are not the truth of the gospel and stack those up in front of what the gospel says, like, and to be more passionate about politics, or to be more passionate about how long your hair is, or to be more passionate about not having tattoos, or to be more passionate about all kinds of cultural things instead of the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so it's not about how you carry yourself. It's about making sure that we don't erect other barriers in front of the gospel so as to make it to where people don't hear us when we preach the gospel. But be bold, be low-key, be whatever your personality is.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, share the gospel.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Sunday is more of you're preaching from the text through the text for the conviction of our hearts, whereas this is very much, I'm meeting Rich the person.
This is a conversation. And if you come to a context where I teach, it's very different than Sundays, right?
Yeah.
So I'll lay out some material, there'll be an outline, and then I'll say, what questions do you have, right? I'm not doing that on Sunday. And so, like, there's just all kinds of different contexts where those things are expressed. It's different context, different mode, different medium, and that's just the reality of it.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah, good question.
And that's all the questions I have for now.
For now, but there will be another Friday that comes, because you know what, Mark? They come once every 7 days.
Every 7.
Every 7. And so Rapid Fire Friday, we'll be back.
All right. Well, I'm going to hold you to that.
All right, sounds good.
Take care, guys.